Hey, my friend, and welcome to Aligned to Rise, the podcast for ambitious women who are ready to rise above their symptoms, release old limitations, and fully rise into their true power and potential. I'm your host, Alyssa Chavez, functional nutritionist, performance coach, and former endo and infertility warrior who knows what it's like to feel held back by your body and your beliefs. I've taken a journey of true healing from the inside out so that I can show up feeling great in my body, confident and unstoppable. And now I'm here to help you do the same. Through a blend of functional nutrition and deep mindset work, this show will empower you to reclaim your vitality, trust your intuition, and live unapologetically in your purpose. If you're ready to align your body, mind, and spirit so you can rise to your highest potential, you're in the right place. Let's rise, my friend. This show was created for educational purposes only and should not be used as a replacement for medical advice or treatment. Hey, my friend, and welcome back to the podcast. I am so thrilled to welcome back onto the show Katie Edmonds, who is the author of the wonderful book and blog, Heal Endo. If you have not checked out her work before, please do that. If you're somebody who struggles with endometriosis, or maybe you know somebody who does, and you have not followed Katie's work, you definitely need to jump on board and check out her book. Now, I have had Katie as a guest on the podcast before where we really took a deep dive into just understanding what endometriosis is. I will link to that previous episode in the show notes if you'd like to go back and check that one out. However, I just knew that I had to have her back on the podcast because one of the things that she talks about that I think is just so powerful to know is just the research around the behavior of endometriosis, because so many of us, I think, are led to believe that endometriosis is just one of those things that's just going to progress over time. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And the truth is, when you really dig into the research, and she actually brings in some specific studies that she's talking about, when she's talking about these studies, they actually show that that is not the case for everybody. In fact, there are many cases when endometriosis either stays just steady where it is, or it can even regress and essentially get better. And I think that that is just such empowering knowledge, because when you're diagnosed with something like endometriosis and you're just told that it is a lifelong condition and just something you're going to have to learn to manage, it can feel very disheartening. Now, of course, everybody's scenario, everybody's case is going to be a little bit different, but I do think it's important to just be aware of the possibilities, what can happen, what may be possible for you. So I will let Katie dig into all of these specifics here because she is just a wealth of knowledge. She has taken so much time to dig into all of the research and all of the studies because truthfully, there is so much out there when you really take the time to look, but she breaks it down and unpacks all of that for us so well. So I will let Katie take it away, and I hope you enjoy. All right, Katie, thank you so much for being here on the podcast today, back on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's always such a pleasure chatting with you and hearing everything that you have to share. And I know the conversation we're going to dig into today is just such an important one, something that just maybe isn't talked about enough or understood well. So I hope that today's conversation can really help to bring some clarity around just the behavior of endometriosis and how it really works in our bodies and the individuality behind that. We'll kind of dive into all of that today, but thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about all this stuff.
Yeah, same here. So I know much of my audience is probably already familiar with your work. I know if you've worked with me at all or listened to the podcast any length of time, you've definitely heard me talk about Katie's book, which is called Heal Endo. Such a fantastic resource. I highly recommend if you haven't read the book before, check that one out. You definitely need to add that to your must-read list. But for those who may not be familiar with you and haven't come across your work before, I would love if you could just share a little bit about who you are and what you do and how you came to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah, of course. So, yeah, I'm an author, an endometriosis educator, and a nutritional therapist specializing in endometriosis. And how I got here is I dealt with endometriosis myself. I think all of us in this world have basically dealt with it ourselves, and we got to a certain point where we felt like we could give back to the community in a certain way. And I myself had terrible symptoms from endometriosis, like life-altering symptoms for nearly a decade. I was one of those, like the chronic and the chronic disease, right? And no matter what I did that the doctors told me, I just wasn't getting better. And I say it was kind of like the anger fueled me to look at endometriosis from another perspective as this, menstrual disease, and I wasn't getting pregnant. And I thought, what gives? I'm a perfectionist and I perfected everything the doctors told me to do, like the bad surgeries, the birth control, the veganish diets, all the stuff. And doing actual research on endometriosis, it kind of exploded my brain that it wasn't this disease that I had been told it was. It wasn't even a disease that most of us with endometriosis think it is. It's something really different. So that's what led me to, well, shift how I was treating the disease, first of all. And it was that shift that actually was the first time I say I got healing traction. I wasn't just spinning my wheels doing a million things, right? I was taking like 60 supplements, I swear. It was, one of those, you think you're doing everything right. I switched it, flipped the script, and that's when like my chronic fatigue started to disappear. My energy levels came back, my pain disappeared. I had a lot of pelvic pain. My life started to come back to me, and then I got pregnant a few years later after that. And this is after doctors had recommended hysterectomy. So it was that process that had me thinking, like, am I kind of an anomaly in the situation? Like endometriosis is progressive. I was so terrified to come off birth control because I had this thought in my head that the birth control was stopping this like evil alien beast inside of my body from like taking over my organs. I was like, how could I even try to get pregnant for 6 months, like without birth control? What if it just advances beyond belief? And what, big part of the research I stumbled upon is that endometriosis is not progressive in all people. Far from it, and we're going to talk through some of this research, but the gist of it is you're less likely to have progressive endometriosis than to have the endometriosis stabilize or regress or resolve. And that means the lesion actually disappears. And we're going to talk, it's not magic. This is how a wound is resolved, right? It's like the body took care of the lesion. And it was that, all of that stuff is why I wrote the book, Heal Endo, and talk at length about all of this research, putting it together to show that endometriosis is not necessarily a thing we get that then progresses. I call it like a noun. It's much more of a verb, endoing, and it can go a few different directions is what we see. I used to say it's three, but I kind of like maybe five is a better direction. So if you take your hand, you have your middle finger, that's a lesion that's stabilized. That's something that a lesion can do. You can have it maybe your whole life and it's not getting worse and it's not getting better. It's just stable. Okay, so now it can go in the progressive direction. It can actually become genetically and epigenetically altered to become a worse form of disease. Let's say it's now way more sensitive to estrogen, or it's way more reactive to bacteria or inflammation. So it's actually creating more symptoms, or it's growing, spreading, that kind of thing. And then being associated with scar tissue and adhesions, because not all endo has that development, but that's due to a really chronic, prolonged state of inflammation. So that's the progressive direction that you absolutely don't want. But that stabilized lesion can also regress. So it can shrink in size or volume, and it can also resolve. This means that the body took care of it, it's healed, there's no more lesion. So all of these directions are really categorized in research. The earliest one I found, and I don't think it's the earliest one total, but I found from 1987 was the first one that I could see of a clinical trial that looked at two different groups of women, and the women that were taking the placebo for treatment, they had endometriosis regress or stabilize. So I'm thinking this is all the way from 1987, we knew this. There's so many more studies, because it was hard at first to look at how human endometriosis lesion behavior unfolds because back in the day before imaging, you needed to cut women open, which has like a moral implication, right? Like taking women and saying, if you do this, does your endometriosis get better or worse? Every time you do laparoscopy, there's, a risk of complications, a risk of adhesions, or, anything that could go wrong. So that's why we pretty much had clinical trials for a while, looking at drug companies that were saying, does this drug influence, or treatment influence endometriosis? But now we also have other studies that are really cool because they're using MRI and visual technology. So I'm excited to see what comes out in the next 10 years too. Did you want me to go through some of those studies that show, because this is such a new topic that a lot of women don't know about?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So the first study that kind of rocked my boat when I was looking at, am I the anomaly? Like, let's check out the research and see what it says. Because we know that symptoms can go into remission, right? That's like really widely regarded, that things can influence symptoms, but then it's almost like you're not allowed to say, but it can influence the disease because we don't necessarily know. Like, you don't know if you did a dietary shift and your symptoms went away, if your endometriosis lesion also went away or resolved or whatever, right? So what these studies only look at is the disease itself. I want to make that really clear, and that you can also have disease regression or stabilization, but you might still have a lot of symptoms. Okay, so we're just talking about how the lesions behave. So this first one that I stumbled upon, it was from 2013, and it was an opinion piece by a researcher who was suggesting we update our entire understanding of endometriosis as a progressive or only solely progressive disease due to these 7 different studies he did a review on from before. And what it shows is that of the women who had no treatment between these 2 laparoscopies, that 29% of them had progression. So the endo is getting worse. You don't want that. 42% showed disease regression, and 29% remained stable. So that's overall 71% did not progress during the periods within those 7 different studies. And I was like, what? I was thinking a regression or stabilization rate might be lower, like maybe 10 to 20%. But for the rest of us, like, you're kind of screwed. And this is saying, actually, you're much more likely to have regression or stabilization than progression. And hopefully all the studies that come after that are really similar. They're similar in line. So one of the studies that he looked at was from the year 2000, and it was to look at a drug that would help fertility. So all of these women, yeah, this is the one. They had 100 women in the study. Half were given a drug called medroxyprogesterone acetate, so kind of a progesterone going on there to help with fertility. And the other half were taking placebo, because in the clinical trial, you need them to believe that they're taking the medication, right? Now, in this study, I'm trying to think how long it was. I think it was 3 to 6 months. The really interesting thing is there was barely any difference from the placebo and the progesterone. They were so close that there was no statistical difference. And in the lesion size, 46% had no change, 49% had regression, and 5% had progression. So it's in a little bit of a shorter time frame, right? Like up to 6 months. But in the amount that had regression, had improvement in the endometriosis, half of the ones with stage 1 or 2 endo had regression, whereas only 32% with stage 3 or 4 had regression. So it's kind of interesting. It hints at the idea that maybe lesser, like, stage 1 or 2, mild, early state endometriosis might be able to be resolved a little bit easier or regressed than more advanced stages. That's one thing there. But this is also really interesting in that regression group, that 28% of the regression group who are on the progesterone had their endometriosis totally eliminated, and 42% in the placebo group. So this was so interesting because the placebo actually outperformed the progesterone group by a little bit in these certain things. It's not to say the progesterone wasn't helpful for some people, right? These are like 100 people, like you're looking at all the difference and you're giving percentages. But that's just the reminder, again, that endometriosis resolves. And we're going to talk about why it resolves. Because again, it's not magic. This isn't woo-woo or anything. It's just how the body works. So then there was another study from 2004, and this one looked at symptomatic women, because the women in the previous study, their main symptom was infertility. That's why they wanted to do the study. And they were mildly symptomatic. So they had period pain, most of them did, but the majority, the bigger majority, didn't have pelvic pain. So sort of like, I have period pain, I'm not getting pregnant. But maybe for most of those people, it wasn't like a life-altering disease state, like the one that I was in, and maybe you were in at some point, Alyssa. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
The super symptomatic ones. Okay. So this study actually looks at symptomatic women. This was kind of interesting. They did a placebo surgery for this group. So these women were so symptomatic, they wanted a surgery. Half the women were given a surgery, an excision surgery. The other half were given a placebo surgery. And then to make amends, after 6 months, they gave the group with the placebo the real surgery because they wanted one, right? So it's like basically you're going to get a surgery, but you don't know when. So it was short, so 6 months. Within 6 months, they had to give the second surgery. And with this, we see that, what was it, 45% had progression. So within 6 months, and you see the asymptomatic group within 6 months, only 5% had progression. So that's something interesting to, because it's another hint, right? You're looking at what are some of these hints? It might be that symptomatic endometriosis can be a faster growing or faster progressing, or the state of symptoms is actually fueling that endoing, right? Something I talk about in my book, the actual state of disease causing the symptoms and the progression at the same time, kind of feeding it. What was the other thing? Oh, we also saw that the symptoms improved for the placebo group by 32%, which shows the mind-body connection. Sometimes when you really believe something works, right? So 32%. And in the 6 months, still, it was 33% had stabilization and 22% of the placebo group had regression. So it was about 50-50. Half progressed and then half didn't, of which 22% actually had disease regression. So now we're going to move. I'll try to move a little quicker on these studies.
No,
I
all
always find them
good.
so
Yeah, I'm
fascinating.
fascinated. So
This is
go
another
for
one
it.
from 2004. This is again tracking asymptomatic, so almost completely asymptomatic rectovaginal endometriosis. We're in the severe category here. It's deep endometriosis. They didn't want surgery because obviously it's a very sensitive place to go in surgically, right? Like what if something happens? That can very much happen with intestinal surgery. So they don't have symptoms. Why would they do it? So they're opting for no surgery. So they looked between up to 9 years, they followed these patients. Only 2% developed symptoms related to endometriosis, 5% saw progression, and 93% had stabilization. It wasn't growing, it wasn't changing. So we look at that asymptomatic 5% saw progression. That kind of mimics that other study that was, they were pretty asymptomatic and only 5% were progressing. So these little hints. And then last is this cool study because now they're using imaging technology. So this is 2023, and it was a 2-year study. They were following women with moderate to severe endometriosis, with mild, mostly painful symptoms, but not extraordinary symptoms. They're in the mild category. So none of them wanted to have surgery. They didn't want to do any interventions at all. So they voluntarily decided just to sit and watch to see what happened. And what we saw is that 37% did experience progression, which is also a little bit in line with the more advanced disease might have more of a likelihood of progressing. 13% saw regression and 50% was stabilized. So again, the majority of almost all of these studies is showing regression or stabilization is more likely than progression, which is so fast. It's not like all over the place. Like maybe it's huge progressive, maybe it's not. It's almost like this, like 1/3 progression, 2/3 regression or stabilization. But we're super unique. And in this study, it was great because we had so much information about the behavior. So one of the women who had moderate disease when she started, at her follow-up, which was up to 2 years after, she had gone to advanced disease stage. So she had developed an additional nodule and adhesions with the complete obliteration of her pouch of Douglas, which is the really sensitive area between your vagina and rectum, right? So, I mean, that's fast. That's like blitzing, right? She could have been 6 months to 2 years, but that's really fast progression and, the absolute thing we want to avoid or support someone in avoiding. Then there was one woman who had severe endometriosis, and at her follow-up, she was reduced down to moderate because her nodules reduced in size that much. So she was severe and her body resolved it to the point that she was moderate. And 2 women in this study had complete disease resolution. So their endometriosis disappeared. So when you look at all these different studies, there's ranges, right? We have progression from 7 to 37%. Okay, 7 to 37%. So I like to say the 1/3. And stabilization or regression rates from 63% to 93%. So it's depending on what you're looking at. Like the highest ones was like those asymptomatic rectovaginal lesions, and then maybe the really inflammatory lesions, highly inflammatory symptomatic state might be more associated with higher levels of progression. And then it's different in every body, right? You can be completely asymptomatic and have advanced endometriosis. You can be highly symptomatic, and it's very possible that your lesion is very small and not progressing. So these are averages and percentages, but it's information that is vital. I think it's vital to anyone with endometriosis to know, because if you tell someone, I have kids, if you tell them you suck at soccer, like you're never going to be good, do you know what? They'll never be good at soccer. Like we believe what we hear, we believe what our tell yourself. So if you are then told the doctor, oh, there's no cure for this disease, this is your only hope is some treatments, we'll hope for the best. And you go online and all these endo activists and well-meaning people who are supposedly the leaders of the endometriosis community are saying there's no cure and this is just, this is how it is. It's a progressive disease. You're thinking it's just going to mutilate and take over my body, which is the state I lived in for so long. It's going to mutilate my body no matter what. I don't know how to ever stop it. And here's the thing is, it's possible for the body to stop it because that's what the body does. And this is where we can learn more about healing in a way that's not woo-woo, because there's a lot of this holistic health stuff is woo-woo. And, you need Western medicine to heal something. And it's a state I lived in for a long time, even thinking that like drugs are the thing that heal you. If you're sick, you go get medicine and the medicine heals you. But here's the thing about the body is medicines, they resolve something that your body's having trouble resolving. And then your body, the complex interplay between the immune system, the endocrine system, and the nervous system, they work together to heal you. Like if you have a cut, you cut your hand, and even if you need ointment or stitches, right? No one can actually grow cells and put those cells back together and regrow your skin and then regrow the nerves into it. Nothing. There is nothing that can do that. You are a biological organism and it's up to your biological self to do that. So when we look at it from that state, we say, we can almost imagine endometriosis. There's kind of a phrase that was used for cancer. It was originally used for cancer, that a tumor is akin to a wound that will not heal. Endometriosis is very much the same. What we're getting with endometriosis lesions is an attack of the immune system, a complete attack, which is the very first step of a wound. If you get a cut with a knife, it's going to get red, raw, inflamed because it's trying to kill and sanitize the scene. That is an absolutely essential step. Simultaneously, that wound is actually releasing certain factors. It's releasing oxidative stress factors. It's releasing immune growth factors, the same growth factors that are actually associated with endometriosis in so many ways. Endometriosis survival, sticking to yourself, establishing new endometriosis lesions. So it's kind of this sick cycle when there's this inflammation going on that actually feeds the endometriosis growth rather than leading to the anti-inflammatory step that comes second. This is when you have wound resolution. Your knife cut is going to be healed thanks to wound resolution, and that's the activity that comes after the highly inflammatory moment. So what we're seeing with these women is they have the disease resolution, their body kicked in the way it needed to, and it finally was able to resolve that lesion, which is really cool. And even if it doesn't resolve, if you can manage your endo to a certain extent where it's not causing the physical problems, right? Adhesions and scar tissue and stuff that can disrupt your life forever to a certain extent, right? Because that's really hard to remove the extent of that. Just keeping it, I guess, keeping your body at a state where it can be more allowed to address the endometriosis is key.
Yeah. Gosh, so many wonderful nuggets in there. I'm like, okay, where do we dig in? But I love all the data that's out there. First of all, that there are actual studies and quite a few studies that have been done. So I think that's so good to know. It's not just, we're not just speculating and pulling information out of our hats. I mean, this is actual research that you can find online. So, and what maybe we can do is even link to some of those studies in the
Yeah,
show
I can
notes.
send you all the studies so people can see
Yeah,
them.
that'd be awesome. So if people want to actually look at the studies, that'd be great. But
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, the most important point was what you said about, if you were to tell your daughter she's terrible at soccer, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
it's just the knowing what's possible, right? It's not saying that, if you look at the percentages, it's not like 100% of people are going to regress in their endo, but it's so good to know what's possible. It goes back to,
Mm-hmm.
if you haven't heard the story before of Roger Bannister's 4 Minute Mile. I love this story. I feel like I've probably talked about it on the podcast before, but back in the 1950s, nobody thought it was possible to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. It was just thought to be that humans couldn't do that. It wasn't going to be possible. Nobody could do it. And in mid 1950s, I think Roger Bannister actually did it. He
Mm-hmm.
ran a mile in just under 4 minutes and just proved to the world that it is actually possible for the human body. And since then, hundreds, if not thousands, of people have been able to do that. I am
Right.
not one of them. My mile is probably more like 8 minutes. But
That's still pretty fast. That's like me in high school. That's like
I
killing it over
might
there.
be overshooting that. I'm not a huge runner, but that's not the point. I also have not trained for that, or it's not a goal of mine. But the
Right. There's all those examples, right, of things that they
yeah,
thought were impossible physically, not like making an invention. It's like the human
yeah,
body is not capable of doing that. And then boom, like weightlifting, they can lift a certain amount. Boom, it's
totally.
speed, how high someone can jump. And once one person does it, it's like within a
Hmm.
month, right? It's not like, oh, in 10 years
Oh
later,
yeah,
someone else got to that athleticism. It was a brain barrier.
totally. Can happen
I
fast.
I dealt with, infertility for 3 years, and but by the time I felt very able to get pregnant. Like I didn't have fertile quality cervical fluid like my
Hmm.
whole life. And so finally I like did. I felt so fertile. I felt so energetic, and I wasn't getting pregnant. And my friend, who's a little more spiritual in that realm, she's like, I think you're imagining the getting pregnant process too much, and sometimes you need to blast through that. Like that's the barrier. So she was like, you should do some visualizations of you just like being a mom. So I'm like, okay, what? I'll do whatever. I was open to anything at this point. I'm like, I'll do anything. So I just started doing visualizations of like me with the baby. And like the pregnancy and stuff wasn't even an issue anymore. It wasn't a stressor I was hung up on. I was past that. I had blown through that barrier. And it was that month that I got pregnant. Could have been coincidence, right? But at the same time, I think our cells, I mean, it's proven our cells do listen to our thoughts, right? Through
Oh
psychoneuroimmunology.
yeah.
We know there's actual chemical reactions to our emotions. And so, right. So understanding that there is hope out there is a huge step in the right direction once you have this diagnosis. Like, wow, the body is amazing. Let's see what happens if I give it the resources to be the healthiest body possible. Because you cannot micromanage endometriosis. You cannot micromanage cancer, right? That
Mhm.
is your body's processes. When they're optimized, they have a much better chance at succeeding in combating diseases, from preventing diseases in the first place. You want the optimal health. And then you let the body micromanage the micromanage of the micromanage, right? The
Yep.
tiniest cells, like one tiny little endometriosis lesion. Oh, not a big deal, it's just tiny. That's like hundreds of thousands of cells. Okay, you are not in charge of that process, but you have to allow the body to be to a certain extent. So that's what is so hopeful. But as we had been talking about, sometimes this drive to optimize health gets too far, and there's sometimes too much of a belief in the body can do it all. And this is where I was telling Alyssa before the podcast that it can be people in the endo community might think this information is scary or harmful to the endometriosis community. And I had that realization. I saw Dr. Laura Brighton. She's always trying to read new endometriosis research, and she had posted on Instagram a few months ago how endometriosis can regress, or it might just be a phase for some women. And, most people's minds were rocked. And that's what my realization, like, oh, wow, no one really knows about this. This is crazy. This has been known for so long. I can't believe that people still don't know about this. Yes, deep endometriosis. Yes, all kinds of endometriosis can regress. There's not one type of endometriosis they say can't regress or stabilize. But then there was also some endo activists, some really caring group that was saying how dangerous this information was, and was really pretty irate that it had been talked about. And my question was, do they not know that this is possible, or do they really think it's damaging to the endometriosis community? Like, knowing that endometriosis can regress or stabilize, how could that be? And I did see a connection. I think it's wrong to say it's damaging, but I think it has to come with a lot of context. And that's what I hope we can give with this podcast, because I know working in the holistic community, there's sometimes this like iron grip that holistic healing is going to get rid of the endometriosis, right? It's like, oh gosh, I mean, I was there to a certain extent at some points in my life. And then I have met so many women that are green juice cleansing their endometriosis away. They're master cleansing their endometriosis away. Like, there's a lot of starvation involved. There's this diet, there's all of these things. And one, that completely upregulates the nervous system into this heightened mode where you're just always seeking, everything's always wrong. You're trying to fix all the time. That plays into the disease category. And it also takes away the fact that we may need a surgery, even though the endo can be controlled in some bodies. Let's say it's 2 out of 3. What if you're the 1 out of 3? Like, what if by bad luck you got the kind of endometriosis that's really aggressive and it spreads fast? You're that girl that in her follow-up had severe endometriosis, right? Conversely, you can have stabilized endometriosis and continue to have really bad symptoms. So we think that it's progressing because the symptoms, it's getting worse. It might not be at all. It might be you're having a very sensitive reaction to it, or there's more nerve fibers in your endometriosis. It's near a spot that is constantly moved around with like sex or tampons, which creates now you have like emotional distress in your life, right? You can't be intimate with your partner because of one tiny little lesion in the wrong place. So we can't say to any extent it's, one lesion is not important. It can be everything to a young woman's life, to any woman's life, right? So taking this information to heart should not make it dangerous to anyone, but it should allow us to be more curious with ourselves. One, take so much more control over what we have control over, which is the health of our bodies, health and well-being of our bodies, without controlling the heck out of them, right? Remember, you just let your healthy body do its healthy thing, knowing that you might absolutely need surgery. You might need surgery because you waited 10 years for a diagnosis. You waited 15 years for a diagnosis. Maybe the first thing you should do is have a surgery and, then deal with everything else. It might be in the wrong spot. It might be because you can afford a surgery and you just got diagnosed and, this excellent excision surgeon lives next door and, you just find out there's all reasons to have a surgery. So I'm not trying to negate the need for surgery or the need for Western medicine interventions like birth control, right? We're talking about lesion behavior. There's 2 issues here: lesion behavior and quality of life. And they are both really, really important. Quality of life maybe more so, right, than the lesion behavior, probably. Unless you want to get pregnant and you haven't gotten pregnant yet, fertility is still really in your cards. I'd say quality of life is more important than lesion behavior, because you can have fertility, go through your life asymptomatically and go get your tubes tied and have advanced endometriosis, which is another study that these completely asymptomatic women going to get their tubes tied, and 14 out of like the 230 had endometriosis unbeknown, but it hadn't caused any problem. So if that's the case, do you need the surgery? That'd be up to you. But quality of life is we only have one life, right? You can't
Yeah,
do that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for anyone like us who's experienced that, form of endometriosis where it does really affect your day-to-day life, I mean, that's definitely something to consider.
Oh, totally, right? It ruins everything.
Yeah, sure can. I love what you were talking about too, just the kind of what to do with this information, what not to do with this information. I think that's so important for people and maybe we can even dig into that a little bit more, because I loved the way we were kind of chatting back and forth before the interview here. And I love the way that you were laying it out. Just, how to use this and how
Hmm.
not to use this information. I would love if you can even dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I hope we touch enough on how not to use this information
Yeah.
as like an excuse to control your body even more, negate
Yeah.
Western supports even more. But the way to use it is to say, what are the things that supports the disease resolution? Like, why is it not resolving in my body? Why is endometriosis transient in certain bodies? It comes and goes. Maybe it comes on with an infection and then it seems to resolve, right? There's so many different cases of how endometriosis behaves. So that is what I think the curiosity should lie in, right? Like rather the discussion online being you cannot, it's an incurable progressive disease. I really wish the conversation all over the place was what helps endometriosis regress? What stops it from progressing? Is there a way we can know? Like all of these situations are so super important, and social media is great because it's a collection of unique stories. And if we can all share the unique stories of what's happening, oh, I just got imaging and all of my endometriosis regressed. This is what I've been doing. This is what helped me. Oh, I just got my imaging, because some people are getting imaging now. Here, mine progressed. I did everything. It's a certain type. I had it biopsied. It was a specific type of endometriosis that's really aggressive. There's all sorts of stories we can share. But the things you do and the things I talk about in my book are like the perfect accompaniment to this information. It's saying, right now we have tons and tons of research on animals about how endometriosis can grow or shrink. And that's what every study is looking at. And a lot of them are on rats and mice or in petri dishes, which comes with the question mark, well, does it work on people? But the main focus of these studies are pretty much what happens when we resolve inflammation through this route. Every study is looking at resolving the inflammation, whether it's from an endocrinological view, like we're looking at sex hormones, or through bacteria, right? There's through the nervous system, through how we're thinking and believing if we're stuck in sympathetic, how that produces the disease state. Again, when the disease state is like this highly activated inflammatory state of the body that I refer to as endoing, how do you move out of that? And there's bits that are so simple, right? Like increasing your antioxidants, because you literally do not have the ingredients to stop inflammation if you don't have antioxidants. There's pro-oxidative species, which are inflammatory. You have antioxidants, which you get from brightly pigmented fruits and vegetables, right? Red meat, heart, organ meats, shellfish, all of these antioxidant nutrients also come with a host of other nutrients in them, like zinc and iron and CoQ10 and all these groups of things. You can think of like every color of the rainbow to help you regulate your immune function, help you downregulate your nervous system, help support hormone balance. It seems basic, right? But even sleeping, like if you have one night of botched sleep, it increases inflammation in your body. If you have a week of botched sleep, it increases inflammation exponentially. So when you're saying, oh, how could sleep help this lesion? I just have this disease in my body. It's so separate from me. I hate endometriosis. You can think, how can I support my body in reducing the inflammation so that it can resolve it? I'm not saying everyone can resolve it. I just like
Yeah.
using the word resolve, by the way. I don't want to throw
Yeah.
out there everyone can just disappear. I mean, mine's in remission, but I don't know what it's doing. I've never had imaging. I could have lesions still existing. Heck, I could have lesions progressing. I really don't know. But I just want to say I'm using the word resolution as your body, allowing your body the opportunity to take care of the lesion and prevent it from progressing. So you have the diet, you have the lifestyle, the sleep, the movement, the reducing intra-abdominal pressure. This is like I think it's one of the most exciting things I talk about to women because it involves the lower belly pooch that everyone like wants to get rid of from an aesthetic point of view. So they're like, oh, it's an aesthetic thing and functional, like that's exciting, but it also reduces a ton of inflammation in the pelvis. If you imagine all of your organs, got 11 pounds of organs, and if they're pushing down onto your uterus, pelvic floor, and endometriosis lesions every day, that's going to create a ton of inflammation. It's going to contribute to a cycle of tissue injury and repair, which is a certain cycle that is associated with, again, the inability for a wound to heal. It's constant repair and then damage, repair and damage, and that's what endometriosis is to a certain extent, what's happening there. So lifting the organs up, there's like, you could talk through 100,000 things, and
Yeah.
you could say it's, it's so much of it is within the wellness world. But then conversely, I did a post on Instagram a week or so ago, just reminding how we can become so focused on wellness that it becomes an obsession, and that in itself is unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I used to read, like, in my 20s and 30s, read something like balance is key. And I'm like, what are they talking about? Like, no, it's not. Like, you have to be in or out. Like, you are
Mhm.
totally doing this, you're not. And now that I'm 40, I'm like, balance is key.
Yeah.
You need
I
to like eat
agree.
good food, but not freak out if it's not the best food.
Totally.
Like, if you're on vacation, you can't find your organic, free range, whatever, like, eat your food and thank it. You can't be stuck in this mindset of, if I'm not doing perfect, my health suffers. It has to be, my body as well, and what I'm doing is good enough for right now. And, working to create good habits without kind of ruining your life, in the holistic world.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. Something that I talk about a lot as well. It's something that definitely has come up in my life too, especially in my early days of
Yeah.
learning about nutrition and just, mind being open to all the ways that I can help to support my own body through everything you're talking about, the diet and lifestyle and sleeping and all the things. And it's so easy to then go down that rabbit hole of like, oh, I have to do all these things, quote
Now I'm
unquote,
going to be the best at
correctly.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to kick my health's butt over here. And yeah. And then you get into this mental state of just kind of that obsession. And
Mhm.
I just, perfectionism, I guess, is probably a better word for that. Just having
Yeah.
to do everything right and perfectly and just, stressing out if you're not able to do that. And I absolutely, and I tell my clients this all the time. I'm so not perfect in my diet. I eat well. Like if you look at
Mhm.
overall, if you look at like a 30-day period of time, I eat well. However, like even yesterday, I was out with my husband. We drove down to the beach and like walked on the pier and we're just having a fun day. And I ate some French fries and I feel
Yeah,
okay about it. Not something I'm gonna do
totally.
every day of my life, but it was just part of the fun, the experience we were having that day. And I just let myself enjoy it,
Right.
and I think
Yeah.
that's
French
such an
fries are
important piece.
delicious.
Totally.
Like French fries.
Yeah.
Right. You eat them every day in combination with stress and soda and, a sedentary lifestyle. Like, that's a damaging set of choices. You eat pretty well. You're laughing, you're communicating with your husband, you're going for a walk outside and you eat some French fries. Like, that's health. Have you, I don't know. There's a story from Rob Wolf. He wrote a book a long time ago, something about healing from diet. And
Mm.
he talked about the pizza diet. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
It's so he had a client who was like really freaked about food, had
Yeah.
all these autoimmune issues, and he had gone to the functional medicine, like, what can I do? And either this doctor recommended it to him or he decided on his own that he was just so over it. Like, he'd done everything, and his friends had like a pizza and beer night once a week that they went to, and he was just like, I don't care, I'm doing everything and my life still sucks. Like, I might as well stop doing everything. And he started going to pizza and beer night. So he's eating like gluten and dairy and alcohol, right? All the things you'd be
Yeah.
like, don't eat gluten and pizza and dairy, like if you're autoimmune condition. And he started to get better and better because the thing of, the nervous system, when you start to introduce safety into your world, you may not be eating perfectly, but your body stops wigging out. And it's that
Yeah.
safety aspect of, I'm surrounded by community and friends and I'm laughing. Laugh therapy exists for a reason. And it's not to say any of this stuff can like cure a chronic illness, but what if it's the thing that's allowing your body to pull itself out of that heightened, upregulated immune and inflammatory state? And that's what you want. You want to pull it out of that inflammatory state with laughter and music and friends, with your deep nutrition, the things that you need. Because if you're listening to this and you are, in the orthorexia category, you might need a lot less of the orthorexia in order to heal, rather than hearing this stuff and thinking, I need to hold on more than ever. I'm going to
Yeah.
combat my body into submission. You might do a lot of letting go and like,
Yeah.
the let go. I'm not in charge of everything. Let me be like Alyssa and I'm going to go get French fries for the first time in like 6 years, whatever it is, right? And on the other
Yeah.
side of things, people that are so relaxed about it, they think that nothing makes a difference, but they're watching shows super late. They're eating all of the damaging set of food choices 90% with a healthy option 10%. They can move more to that center. So it's a center aisle. How does that look in each of our lives? Like it's going to look different in your life. Like I live on Kauai. I don't really have any restaurants around. So, my situation is different than anyone else's, and everyone else's is their own situation in itself. So looking inward, right, and deciding what are some of the biggest pressure points in your own life that, like, what are 3 things you can do this month that will help bring down that upregulated state?
100%. That's totally been my journey this year, especially, is
Mm.
just how can I just relieve some pressure from my life, like hit that release valve a little
Yeah.
bit. And there's been like some major life changes happening and just a lot of shifts and changes, and but all in the direction of like I want to be able to live a life that is exactly what you described, just full of fun and joy and
Yeah.
you know, spare time and flexibility and white space and just ability to explore new things. And I feel like it's made, I feel the best that I've felt in a long time. And I was already, doing well previously to that. But yeah, I've seen
Because you
so
relieved the
many.
pressure, you're saying. You had
Totally.
too much that was pushing down, and then you think,
Yeah.
maybe I'll feel better if I add one more sometimes. You
Right.
sound like a
We're
recovering
totally.
perfectionionist like
Oh yeah.
me.
I definitely went
Yeah.
through that phase too of like, what else can I do to take care of my body and just kind of obsessing about all the things. I feel like that's so many of us. Like you go from one extreme and then maybe to the other extreme, and then you find
Yeah.
that middle ground where it feels like it's actually a sustainable way to live your life that feels healthy in the grand scheme of things, but also, like you said, there's a balance there where
Yeah.
just
And
kind of
how
let
do you
loose.
know? It's almost like, it's hard sometimes when you're living in it to know which way to go. And I'd say if you're worrying about how healthy you are, but you are working on being healthy, then you're probably gone too far in that direction. Like if you're worrying because your data tracker told you your sleep was bad last night and now you're really worried, like you got to take that thing off. Like
Yeah.
just take it off. Your sleep you're fine. Like wake up and feel how you feel. Do you feel rested? Because
Yeah.
how many steps you get, all those things. It's like we can constantly track, or we can just live our lives and follow how we feel in general, right? Which is a
Yeah.
lot more intuition based, which is a bit, I personally was shut off completely from all intuition as a child. I think in the West we are. It's like you count calories, you count hours of sleep, you go to school, you're scheduled. Oh, there's all the things. And then you forget how to like listen to the intuitive messages of your body. Like I am exhausted, like I can't believe this. No, coffee time.
Right. Coffee, keep going.
Yeah, I'm really stressed. Well, I should
Yeah.
get my master's then. That will stop me from, like we do these things. So yeah, I guess we've gone down a little bit of a different way from like the
That's
science
okay.
stuff, talking about intuition
All
and
good.
listening to these things, but it's all part of the journey,
It
right?
totally is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like this has been just such a fantastic conversation today, and I'm so happy that we were able to make this happen. And even that, I feel like that route we ended up taking at the end, hey, we're following our intuition of just where this conversation needs to go next. So I feel like we took it from the science to the intuition and everything in between. So I think that's perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, it's hard. Like I get wrapped up in a thing, like a research thing, and currently it's my research focus has been on the nervous system and just how much the nervous system is perhaps the main driver of actually the inflammatory process. And so it's like the immune system is doing it to a certain extent. Your immune system is what establishes a lesion, and your immune system is what allows that lesion to grow. And your immune system is the reason you have scar tissue adhesions. So my whole book, Heal Endo, is all about the immune system. And I'm humbled that I wrote a small chapter on stress, knowing what I'm researching now about the nervous system and the extent of it. So, without I just feel like that's where my everything goes back to, like the intuition and the emotions and stuff is that nervous system component. And I hope I can explain it better ongoing. But for all the scientists out there, it is just such an important part that we're often the most uncomfortable looking
Mhm.
at.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to look at data and count macronutrients and micronutrients than
Mhm.
to look at our state of being and how our nervous system is reacting to the world. But again, as part of that the whole body picture of endometriosis. It's not just a lesion and it's not just symptoms. It's a whole body disease from the brain to the toes. There's every bit of you can be affected. So keeping that in mind as everyone moves forward with our own treatment strategies.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. It's not just about the lesions at the end of the day. It's
Oh,
the whole thing, the whole body. And yeah, that's definitely been a big part of my journey is working on working on, that's probably not the right term to use, especially based on the conversation we were just having, but just learning to tune in and to support my nervous system and just tuning into my emotional state and stress and anxiousness and worry and some of these different things that tend to pop up on a day-to-day basis, and just kind of tune into that. Like, where is this coming
yeah.
from? Are there things I can kind of tweak and change to bring myself into a better state? I mean, there's so many little pieces to look
Yeah.
at, but yeah.
I'm proud of you. It's a hard journey sometimes.
Thank you.
That's a lot.
It's a journey for sure.
Journey. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Katie. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I know people are going to want to reach out to you and connect to you and hear more about you. So we'll link to this in the show notes as well. But what are the best places to find you?
Yeah, I'm at healendo.com and my Insta handle, I think it's heal.endo
Yeah.
on Instagram. But I'm not super active on Instagram, but you can always find me on my website.
Perfect. All right. We'll be sure to link to that in the show notes. And just a huge thank you for being here, for sharing everything that you've learned along the way. And I hope that this really just spreads a message of hope and understanding to so many women out there who are struggling.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, everybody, thanks so much for joining us and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for tuning in to Aligned to Rise. If this episode spoke to you, take a moment to share it with a friend who needs this message too. And then don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'll see you next time, my friend. Let's rise together.